Today, I have a panel of 4 people for you, and I'll introduce myself. I'm Christine Bedz, I'm a managing director for GMF's Geostrategy North, so the German Marshall Fund in Washington, D.C. The panelists we have for you today, 2 in person and 2 online, are sitting or former defense ministers. We have the host for us today, Minister of Defense Andris Spruds from Latvia, and a very close northern neighbor, Minister Hanno Pevkur, Minister of Defense of Estonia. Online, we are joined by 2 former ministers of defense from close allies, very committed to the Baltic region in particular. We have on your left, former Minister of Defense Matej Tonin from Slovenia, current Member of Parliament. And to his right, we have former UK Minister of Defense Ben Wallace, also serving still in the same capacity as Matej. So we will start a bit looking at where we are today on defense and on protecting every inch and every centimeter. We're here sitting in Riga, in many ways in the very heart of the eastern flank. And the promises, political commitments to protect every inch and every centimeter matter very much right here, where the concerns that where those centimeters that might need to be defended lie could be Latvian centimeters or Estonian centimeters. But this isn't simply a worry here in Riga. In President Biden's address last night, we heard the names of the Baltic states as well as Poland mentioned. And I'm going to quote from President Biden's speech. In his push to get funding for Ukraine from the American people, President Biden said, "So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to, quote, remind Poland that their Western land was a gift from Russia. One of his advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies." So the question of every inch and every centimeter and what could threaten those inches and centimeters in the future is incredibly important here. And a lot has been done. Step 1, political promises from the very beginning. We've heard about inches and centimeters. I'm glad that it is both. And in Vilnius last summer, the NATO allies adopted new territorial defense plans, regional defense plans, which are much more robust than ever before. But my question is, and question for the sitting and former ministers, what are steps 3, 4, 5? What does this actually look like? And to kick us off, I'll turn to our host, to Minister Spruds, to tell us what do you think of what has been done so far? Are these plans, are the preparations, is the armament that we have thus far enough based on what we see in Ukraine?
Christine, first of all, thank you so much for kind introduction as well. And I guess on the behalf of Ministry of Defense and on behalf of organizers, of course, I am very happy also to welcome everyone in Riga and Riga conference, so the annual one. And I see so many familiar faces, so of course I'm very happy to be part of this community of distinguished participants and also speakers. But coming back to your question, I mean, what we achieved and what we should still do, let's put it in the context. Of course, what we have seen, it's Russia's aggression since 2014, and of course 2022 was fundamental game changer. For some, Zeitenwende, existential threat, an absolutely existential threat, which remains and which should be addressed. So there is no time, space, there is no inch for complacency. And what we have seen in the Madrid summit and what we have seen in Vilnius summit, I think really it is a generational adaptation. It is a success in terms of thinking how we address those existential threats in our neighborhood and how we move forward. Achieving the regional plans, new NATO defense model, the strategic concept with exactly incorporated ideas that we defend every inch of our territory. It is very important and, of course, very also a considerable step forward. Additionally, membership of NATO for Sweden and Finland. Yes, Sweden is still waiting, but we are sure that it will be soon, and Sweden will be soon a NATO member. So that's why, absolutely, I think those decisions, especially on regional plans, are extremely important. Also, additional commitments at 2%, it is a commitment to be fulfilled. But at the very end, we of course come to the implementation stage. The plans are good, the plans are important, but plans are always, in a sense, being changed by reality. But planning is indispensable, and I think in this regard, again, it has been a very important step forward. But if we speak about the plans, of course, force availability, force integration, reinforcement, enablement, these all things are which should be kept in mind and which should be implemented. On a larger scale, we still come back to the wider political will and willingness to invest also financially. 2%. If you look back in 1980s, then average and NATO contribution to military expenses were around 4% and more than 4%. In 1985, end of 1980s, out of 16 countries, 14 countries committed themselves with more than 2%. At the moment, we see 11 countries out of 31 countries. So that's why, again, political investment, financial investment, if we want to fulfill those plans, it's not just about the plans. It's not just about force availability and force projection, but actually it's about also quite a considerable political decisions to invest, to move forward, to adapt also with military industry. So it's a wider ecosystem which should be actually implemented. But we are on the right track.
I like the optimism, but there's a lot to do. The median defense spending, as you say, is right. It is lacking about 1.82%, rather than 2%, which is the goal that needs to be met. But I want to turn to Minister Pevko to talk a bit about the practicality. We talk a lot about, broadly deterrence and defense by denial, protecting every inch, centimeter, and so forth. How does that work? What is the role for the national defense services? Where does NATO step in? Is NATO there from the first centimeter for the defense? How do you defend with NATO as NATO?
Well, welcome to everybody, and it's actually very, very good to be back here in Riga, and good to see Benny. Considering that you have a storm somewhere there in Scotland, that it's good that you are online. And somehow I feel that, that it's sometimes when I go to the schools, then the first rows are always empty because nobody wants to sit there. So everybody is behind. So, but it's okay, I can see you. When we talk about practicality, then to be honest, we are NATO. We are all together NATO. So there is no split between the country's own defense forces and NATO's defense forces. So this is why we have to be very clear that it doesn't matter, is it British troops in Estonia, Canadian troops here in Latvia, we are all together. And the defense plan, I don't split Estonian defense plan and NATO's regional plan. For me, this is one plan. And this one plan means that, we have to kick, or not even kick Russians out, but we cannot let them in, because every centimeter we give away is very difficult to take back. We see that in Ukraine at the moment, and this is why, my clear understanding is that of course Estonian forces, together with Brits, France, and US troops, we start from the first moment on, but there are so many details. First, early warning. So when you don't have the early warning, nobody will be ready, and we saw that just now in Israel. Secondly, enablers. Thirdly, of course, all these routes, logistical routes. But what also Andrei said, what is very important at the moment, that where we stand at, and this standing point at the moment is the restart for NATO. Because yes, I fully agree that when we had 4% in 80s, and now from 91 after the collapse of Soviet Union till today, basically 1%. So then let's make a very quick calculation. It's rough calculation, it's not correct, I know that, but just to have the understanding. Lacking 2%, let's say Estonia is going to 3%. I'm not talking about the 4%, which was, but let's say from 1% to 3%. So we are lacking each year 2%. So only GDP of European Union is around 20 trillion euros. So 20 trillion, multiply that, so 30 years, multiply that to 2%, so we will get a huge number. So we will get, like, let's say 2 trillion, so 200 million per year. So multiply that to 30 years, we see that it's around 6 trillions, what we're lacking at the moment, or even more. So this is the reality, that we don't have enough, or we have not spent enough money in last 30 years. So this is like the first standing point. That means that now is the restart, but we also have to acknowledge that we don't have much time for this restart, because Russia is ready to, rebuild its army rather sooner than later. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, doesn't matter. For us, we know that there is no time. So let's use this momentum now. Let's try to take this restart or reset of NATO. We have the regional plans, but the regional plans, yes, have to be also filled with the forces, because every force which is not given to NATO force means that we are risking the lives of our soldiers. So this is the reality. Not that, because when Slovenia has forces or UK has forces, and we all commit to the force model and in these force sourcing conferences, and we can say that, yes, all these plans which have been foreseen by SACEUR, that these are implementable, executable, and also filled with forces, then we can say that, yes, we will spare our own soldiers' lives. But we start from the first meter on. There is no doubt about that.
That is good, but it's all about the money. And I think we just hear the billions and trillions and percents being thrown around, but that is, it is critical. But for those who contribute, Slovenia is a big contributor to the EFP here, the Enhanced Forward Presence in Latvia. So Slovenia is deeply invested. How does that read in Slovenia? Is this something that is a point of pride? How does Slovenia see itself part of this every centimeter and every inch?
So, technical details. So, distinguished guests, good afternoon. It's very good to see you. So, right now, the weather in Ljubljana, it's nice and warm. I'm absolutely sure that the Slovenian soldiers are missing nice and warm weather. But while speaking with them, they are happy. They are happy that they are in Latvia because they show solidarity. And when we had a discussion in the parliament why we should send our troops far away in the north, in the Latvia, it was especially for many Slovenians difficult to understand why we should send our soldiers there, because we simply don't have anything with the Eastern Europe, or example, with the border between NATO countries and Russia. But I think that overall the message, even in Slovenia, is clear that it is super important that our soldiers are there in Latvia to show solidarity with all our allies. That's absolutely clear, and I'm proud that this is not questionable anymore now. So nobody is asking why are our soldiers still there. People understand, soldiers understand why are there. But I wanted to underline something else as well. I was listening to the current ministers, and of course, NATO is a great alliance. I'm one of the most vocal supporters here in Slovenia, but I have to focus on the European branch of NATO alliance. And we have to be very clear and exact that Europe alone cannot survive a large-scale attack without our allies from the United States. And that's what really worries me. In a way, this is the greatest irresponsibility of European politics, is that we are building reliance completely on American politicians as well on American taxpayers. That's why we have to simply do more on our own to invest in our defense capabilities, because this is the best investment in peace. I have to be, in a way, honest. Slovenia is not very good with the defense spending, so that's why we have a lot of work to do still back home. And many politicians understand how difficult sometimes it is to convince voters, citizens, that we have to spend more for defense. But I think that people can clearly see what's going on in Ukraine and right now in Israel as well, that this is simply a necessary thing to provide peace.
Thank you. But the need to get to the 2% becomes ever faster. If we look ahead, really not even that many months, there's the Washington summit, the next one, in Washington, D.C. next summer. And if there's a place where the 2% question is incredibly important and perhaps overly simplistic, but definitely on the minds of a perhaps rabid far-right media landscape, it's Washington, D.C. So when Slovenia shows up in Washington, D.C. next summer, will you be prepared for the 2% conversation? What are you going to say to how you get there? And is that something that you're concerned about or ready for?
It would be a tough meeting. I know it was very uncomfortable whenever we had the meetings with our NATO allies or within the NATO headquarters to explain them why our defense spending is so low. Why are we simply prolonging or transferring our burden to, for example, Latvian taxpayers, British taxpayers, or, for example, American taxpayers? We had a hard time, when I became minister, I started with 1% of GDP for defense spending. It was really low. We started to invest more. We passed special bills which allow us to invest or spend more for the defense, and the percentage is rising and is going up. And in realistical, let's say, environment, I think that we will reach 2% way beyond 2024, which is in a way unacceptable for me, but that's a reality. And that's why I think that we should talk more about defense spending, especially those countries who spend at least 2% GDP for defense should encourage countries like Slovenia to speed up.
Yes, we wish you lots of luck on that. The UK has been speeding up in all sorts of ways. And so, Mr. Wallace, your country's contribution to the enhanced forward presence and leadership of that in Estonia, the legacy, the significant commitment that the UK has made to the Baltic region, really over a century or more through the JEF and other things, is very well known and respected here. That is, how do you feel about selling that to the British people? How do you feel that this every centimeter, including the Baltic centimeters, how can that be sold? Is that sold well across the UK?
Britain is always sort of naturally expeditionary and also always open to our allies. We back in 1939, we went to war with Nazi Germany to defend Poland. We supported Ukraine last year, not because there was some clever calculation about who we thought would win or lose, but because it's the right thing to do. And we have a very strong affinity with not only the Baltics, but obviously with Poland, one of our oldest allies, 150 years. So the British public, there's always the small voice of people who say, why aren't we all spending our money at home? But ultimately, we see support for Ukraine at 72%. We have some of the highest support in the whole of Europe. And that allows the United Kingdom to play its role in defending Europe. Because the security of Europe is also the security of Britain. And we've always known that. And I think that's, for us, a fairly straightforward problem. I don't see in any of the political landscape, whether it's my party or the Labour Party or the Scottish National Party even now, who've now embraced NATO, being or feeling that there's a sort of choice to be made. I think we feel it is, it's all in, wherever that may be, and we try and equip and fund our armed forces to have that ability. But I think, as both Hannah said and was said at the beginning, that the challenge now on the NATO regional plans is to deliver, right? It is to, first of all, play catch up. We've all been exposed since the invasion of Ukraine this last year, but also 2014, with our own weapon stocks and our inadequate stocks, really, and we need to catch up, and that's what we're spending our money on. We also need to start delivering by actually allocating the forces to the plan, but not in a sort of paper manner. It was interesting, before Ukraine, NATO sort of moved at a snail's pace. It would have a plan, people would allocate forces, but you had plenty of years to sort of reach the force level you'd promised to NATO. It was quite a slow thing. It wasn't, there was a lot of hollowness on the table, I think, at the beginning of some of these cycles. So I think, the real challenge is to show Putin that we're serious, that we are up-arming and we are equipping, and then actually exercise together. The lesson of Ukraine is the forces on the ground have to demonstrate that not only can they sort of interoperate together, but they can actually, in reality, combine their arms to deliver. And what we see is Russia isn't very good at that. We see Ukraine struggle to take that on board at larger formation scale. They can do it at sort of company level. And when you ask our armies, when did we last exercise at division or corps level as a full corps across Europe, in the way I did when I served in West Germany as a young officer, I think you'll find it's been decades since we've actually put in the field a corps. And the reason I think that is because everyone knows we don't really have the enablers we should. So I think this phase is now about delivery, coupled with the growing political pressure that needs to be put on countries to spend 2%. It is, there are some pretty big countries in Europe who I don't think will maintain 2% in the long run. And I think there will be a number of pledges that won't be made either or matched by even 2030. And I think I already see the language among some of the biggest countries in Europe that's sort of backpedaling on their commitments. And it will be interesting to see if they really are prepared to sustain a 2% budget.
I'm also curious about whether the outcome of next November's US election will change the rate of backpedaling or not, because I think that will potentially keep the 2% question very much front and center. But in terms of the UK and what the UK needs to serve the role that it could play, wants to play in NATO, what is one thing? Is it exercising more robustly? Is it financing? Or is it humans who want to do it? What is the single most important thing for UK to be ready to defend every centimeter, every inch alongside its allies?
Well, I think first and foremost, it is to continue its commitments in place. Forward presence matters. And, we are delighted and very much enjoy being part of the Estonian, with our battle group out there and our ability to grow it to a brigade, but also the ability to have forces in Poland, which we do as well, and have forces able to be delivered wherever we need to in the sort of NATO region. And I think that investing in enablers and lessons from Ukraine, better electronic warfare, signals intelligence, all of that is really important. Some of the £27 billion extra that I got as Defence Secretary are now being invested, and we'll see the Boxer fleet being rolled out. So the Army and the Air Force and Navy are on the right track in the United Kingdom. But here's the other sort of issue that no one really talks about is we could all pledge a lot of money tomorrow, but defence spending takes time. We have to build up our manufacturing. We have to increase the supply lines. All of us on this call have been involved in supplying Ukraine, and often frustrated that even when we had the money, our factories weren't able to increase the rate of production. So we have to make sure industry is investing, And that takes time as well. And that's one of the races that is going to be on. Russia, how long will it take Russia to properly rearm versus how long will it take NATO and all those pledges to actually start arriving in factories and in our armed forces to deliver us a match fit, as we'd say, a match fit armed forces. And I think that's the most important thing. And then the last bit, I think, is building on our resilience. It's no coincidence that the Nordic states and Poland and are the ones who have the best reserves. They are the ones who look what we've just seen in Israel. One of the best deterrents is mobilization. How quickly can you mobilize your reserves? The further east you go, the better they all are, whether that is Norway, Finland, Estonia, Latvia. This speed that you can get your reserves out compared to sort of Western Europe, Britain, France and Germany is remarkable, and that's a deterrent in itself. So we have to work on that.
Absolutely. Quickly back here, besides money, for both of you, what is the one thing that would really help that every inch of land? Money, of course, pays for everything, but can we go beyond that to one level more of granularity? What is that extra piece you'd like to see as quickly as possible? And yes.
Of course, money is still important, because if you connect, if you merge those couple of very indispensable things, one is, of course, regional plans. Regional plans, to some extent, top-down approach. You need also bottom-up approach. Basically, you need to start also to have tactical plans as well, and boots on the ground. Then, of course, you need to have all the capabilities which are important to enforce and to enable those also forces to be efficient and actually to have a more proactive deterrence and defense as well. And these are big capabilities. These are very financially intensive capabilities. So that's why, of course, the financial part is absolutely, it's very difficult to take out of the picture. Plus, there is military defense industry. So basically, we speak about defense readiness, defense industry readiness. So these things are absolutely combined in one wider, you can say, chain, which provides us a stable and secure environment.
Is it better than it was, or are we not there yet?
We are moving in the right direction, as previously we discussed, but of course, there are a couple of things to be done. Boots on the ground. Yes, very good. But I mean, we are still moving to the brigade size, boots on the ground battle group. It will take some time. It will take some time from all sides involved, including from the host nations, including from our nations as well. I see as the Minister of Latvia that, of course, we need to provide all infrastructure. So there is a lot still to do as a homework here in Latvia. Additionally to this, I think very important part is, and I would even call it as a litmus test, this is about air defenses. We are, together with Estonian colleagues, Estonian friends, together with Germany, moving towards, say, air defense systems, medium-range defense systems. But there is still a gap in the timeline. So here again, if we discuss the regional planning, the rotational air defense systems or components are extremely important. And it is not just about the Baltic region. It is about a NATO territory. It's about a NATO alliance. It's about efficiently protecting NATO alliance. So that's why also the political leadership is on a couple of grounds, on a couple of accounts. Of course, finances, but also to make decisions that some of those equipment should be moved to defend not just external border of NATO, but alliance as a whole.
Okay, your answer.
Yes, well, of course, there is no one thing, but if
you start with one thing, right?
If I have to say something, then I would say that you have to be better than your opponent. And then I applaud here to Latvians, basketball and hockey. So, so you showed that you can be better than the big ones. So, and then this is the same principle also in military, that you have to be better than your enemy or the opponent, which means better training, joint exercises. And when we take the Baltics, so joint exercises also on the Baltic level, because this is one war theater. So it's not enough only to have exercises in Estonia, only in Latvia, only in Lithuania. So we are doing that together with the allies. Now we have to merge all these exercises, all these forces, what we have already here, Slovenians, Brits, Canadians, and make one and start to make one big exercise each year. So this is, just exercises. Then joint procurements. You have to procure things together. We are doing that in air defense, also vehicles, basically also HIMARS. So we are doing that, and this is the only way forward. The standardization. We cannot have so many weapon systems. We have in NATO standards in place, but still we have the situation where the different weapon systems cannot use the same size ammunition. So you would take 155, it's different for Caesar and FH-70. So you cannot use them. So this is a problem. So interoperability, interchangeability, more joint trainings, better trainings, and joint procurements. But I can continue for probably for hours to what to do.
That is already so much more than the one question.
But this is one list.
Asked. There's a list and there is one thing, but I think we do need all of them, and they all start with money and coming here, right? So you could boil everything down to pay up, buy stuff, and come here, right?
The common thing is you have to be better than your opponent. So.
Yes, well, we should be very motivated to that
this is one thing.
Already. We had a question from the floor, which I want to take. Do we have microphones around? But if we...
Do we have
maybe before, as we set that up, there's a real question to one of you, if you will take it. Well, maybe to Ben Wallace for that. Do you think that Israel will make it harder to protect every inch of NATO, the conflict in Israel? Is this a trade-off?
No, I think it'll reinforce the messages that most defense ministers at this conference have been saying to their own treasuries and their own prime ministers for quite a long time, which is the world is going to be more unstable and more insecure, and you just need to get used to that, and you're going to have to spend more on your defense to keep us safe. And I think, there's a tendency, in government to trade off, health and education and defense and policing. And there's been for some time, a sort of tendency to just wish it all away. I think what Israel has demonstrated to us is what a lot of us in defense have always known, that there's quite a lot of bad people out there trying to attack our values and our allies. And whether that is at home on our Eastern Front, the Russian government, or whether that is, extremism and terrorism hasn't gone away. And I think that all really Israel has done is helped, I'm afraid. I wouldn't wish those circumstances weren't there, but make the case that, this long period of peace that suited people to take for granted isn't really real. It has been a temporary time, and all the time we should have been investing in our defense. So I don't think it's a choice, not an either or. It shows the power of why you need good reserves and resilience, and it also shows how allies, by deploying, can use deterrence. And I think what you see in Israel is what a lot of these naval deployments are about. They're not really about Israel, they're about warning Iran to stay out and not magnify the conflict.
Okay. In the front row, Ed Lucas. Introduce yourself, though, to the rest of the universe.
Edward Lucas. A quick question for Ben and a general question for the panel. Ben, does the Finland and Swedish membership of NATO make the Joint Expeditionary Force more important or less important? That's just for you. And then more generally, I'd be interested in everybody's thoughts on resilience and deterrence of grey zone aggression, because it seems to me that you've got, with the defence plans, the outline of what you need to do for the military defence, with huge problems of implementation, which you've touched on. I'm not sure that we've really got the resilience under control as a regional issue. This is something that most countries do as a national thing. So in terms of getting a regional threat assessment, integrating our resilience on a regional basis, what do the Estonian and Latvian defence ministers see as the potential for that?
Ben, Mr. Wallace, for you first.
Look, I don't think it's a more or less, Edward. I think the great thing about the JEF is it is a it is a foundation that allows these nations now to plug into NATO. If you remember, when we founded it, there were 2 countries not in NATO, obviously Sweden and Finland, and that is going to change. I think it's a key element, is how I would say. It is now a well-practiced platform of both ministers and military leadership that will allow us to further, I think, exploit that sort of foundation as they come into NATO. Now, it's entirely subject to NATO. We've all been NATO countries and subject to Sakur and his plans. But I think it actually cements Jeff as a really useful and important organization that will help deliver those challenges I mentioned earlier, such as better interoperability, better exercising together. And I think it's a really important platform.
Thank you, and to you guys.
If you allow me, I will address actually both of the questions a bit, also what you addressed to Ben regarding Jeff. So when we talk about resilience and deterrence, so then one of the main messages for your enemy is that don't even think. So this is the core of deterrence, that don't think about, because we are stronger, we are united, and we have definitely more forces to kick you out or not let you in. So that brings me to that and also to the first question, that what that means from the first centimeter on. That means that when we take the different layers, of course our national forces. So this is why you have in NATO treaty also Article 3, which says that first and foremost you have to do yourself. So this is what we are doing here in this neighborhood. And we start from the first meter on, from the first second on, actually days before. And then when we have some troubles inside of NATO, because we have 32 soon, and we have to find a consensus in NAC, so we have still many countries maybe who are not so ready to go immediately to Article 5. So then we have Jeff. So this is the second. So the first layer is our own defense together with the EFP battalions and then all that. The second layer is Jeff, and then the third layer is NATO as an alliance. So this gives us this deterrence, this resilience, what we need. And of course, but it all starts from our own forces, what we have to prepare. This is why we are putting 3%, 3.2 next year and ongoing. And this is why we increased the reservists, the conscription service to 4,000 yearly. This is why we did in last 40 days extra retraining for 10,000 men to increase territorial defense from 10,000 men to 20,000 men. This is all what we do. We send a message that don't even think.
Just to follow up as well, what Hanno was saying, that of course resilience has been one of the catchphrases and objectives of alliance and also the nation states for quite some time. And it seems exactly what Ed was asking as well, that it seems there is a regional dimension to it as well. Illegal migration, cyber attacks and cyber security. 3 Baltic countries actually absorbed 1/3 of attacks from outside, and it seems from one territory it came. So in the last year, in 2022. So basically, of course, we are also facing those cyber attacks continuously. And last but not least, protection of critical infrastructure. So in this regard, there is quite an agenda also on regional level to strengthen resilience, which is sub-conventional, sub-kinetic. And here I think there are instruments. Of course, it's a permanently learning, permanently ongoing process of mutually coordinating things and also trying to find the solutions. But I think that, of course, first of all, the Finnish and Swedish membership, extremely important, indispensable for regional security in all terms, also in resilience building. But then additionally, there are those formats like JEF, Northern Group, NB8 as well. I think there are quite a number of those formats which should be and could be utilized and taken advantage of. But at the same time, of course, the problem is that sometimes we're facing new problems, new agenda, new issues, and we always have to adapt and adjust, like it is now with the protection of civilian critical infrastructure. Again, so it means that the coordination among the nations, coordination among the intra-state institutions, but I would also add coordination among the public and private is extremely important. So this resilience building is quite a wide agenda, but regional dimension absolutely becomes even more important now under those circumstances what we have experienced in the last weeks and the last months.
But how do we get to the how, right? So how do we increase regional resilience? How do we get to that long list of things that need to happen? Is it carrot? What kind of carrots would be important for the publics, for the other member states? Or is it more sticks? 'Cause sticks could be coming, but we have sticks on the outside too. Maybe sticks aren't enough. How do we get to the place where society understands that they benefit from being part of this and that they cannot afford not to?
Well, we know what we do in Estonia, at least, and we can share this experience also to Slovenia and how to increase to 3% defense budget and how to increase the resilience. So we've done that already for many years. That we have the wide approach to defense. So and this means that one thing is that our voluntary defense league consists also from the combatants, women organization and youth organization. So all in all, 30,000 people. So and what we do that we are not, when we take also the budgeting, then we are not looking only on that okay, we are spending on defense 3%, but we are looking also for civilian defense. We're looking what we started from this year, compulsory educational system or in educational system we have compulsory military lessons. So this is the wide approach, and this is when you go from globe level 360 approach to the very one village level. Then in this village, everybody has to know what they do during the crisis, where they go, who will be evacuating them, should they have at least 10 days supply at their home of food, of water, of heating. So this is the wide approach to defense, and this is what we do in Estonia.
Well, may I add something?
Yes, please do.
Of course.
Yes, we'll have.
I addressed you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to underline, of course, that this different narrative in a country. If you have Russia as a neighbor, or you are surrounded with the NATO allies like Slovenia, but still doesn't change anything. I think that deterrence works until your adversaries believe that they cannot defeat you. And I think that Putin attacked Ukraine because he was convinced that Europe is so divided, so unable to accept decision that he will succeed. But luckily, until now, he was wrong. But we have to be honest and put things in a broader context and say it openly that Europe, it's a pity, but Europe is becoming irrelevant on the major geostrategic and security questions. And I'm absolutely sure if we want to be a global player, not just player, we need at least three things. One is a strong economy, second is diplomacy, and third, a strong military which can implement political decisions. And right now, we have problems almost everywhere. With the economy, you can see that it's a buzzword right now in the European Union, the green transformation, green transition. But if we check in the context that we provide 10% of greenhouse emissions, if we close down the whole economy, if we stop all the cars, we cannot save the world. So we have to be cautious how we will develop in the future our economy. Second thing, it's really a tragedy what has happened, for example, with our diplomatic approach. So when Israel was attacked by the terrorists, we had one commissioner who said, okay, we will stop the funding towards the Gaza Strip. Then we had another commissioner who said, no, we are continuing with the humanitarian support. And we had the president of a commission, she fully supported Israel. And then we had a high representative who said that she's not speaking in our name. So we have a lot of things to do. that deterrence will work, and definitely Slovenia will do our part, and I'm happy that we are heading in the right direction.
And we want you to keep heading in that direction, and I wish we all had the enviable geography that you had. To be alpine and surrounded with friends would be beautiful. Minister Sproats.
Yes, I'm just coming back still to the traditional issue of financing and financial part, and of course, in my previous life, in my previous capacity as a political scientist, so one of the main tasks for me was to assess and evaluate what the politicians do and why they are doing it. So of course, and one of the major tasks of the politician is to be elected and re-elected. And at least one of them to implement, of course, the vision, but still to implement the vision, you need to also to be part of the political process. And of course, and I see here, in a unified approach among the transatlantic members, so that there is a diversity among the members. In some of the nation states, in some of the member states, advocate more than 2%, you have some risks actually to be not elected. In the Baltic countries, it's vice versa. If you don't advocate 2%, you might not be elected. So, of course, Baltic countries in this regard, this threat perception, absolutely, which also motivates to invest politically, financially, and also in terms of the societal involvement. So I think this threat perception is extremely important in this regard, unified threat perception. That's why I was also at the beginning referring to the 1980s. There was a Cold War. There was a clear enemy. There was a clear opponent who was aggressive, who had to be constrained and contained. So pretty much we are in a similar situation right now. And that's why, of course, on a level of alliance, on a regional level, the threat perception, the common threat perception building is a very important task. How also political leadership convinces societies.
Absolutely, which is the task for all alliance members to have more of that commonality. We had a question in the back. Yes, standing up. Thank you.
Hi, Krisha Letzuri, Graduate School of Law. I have a question regarding recent events with the pipeline between Finland and Estonia. Yesterday and today, President Rinkiewicz raised an idea that if it proves that it was Russia, we should block their access to the Baltic Sea. I would like to hear the panel's view on it, and maybe Mr. Wallace, as the UK has one of the biggest navies in Europe, is that even doable, and how would it look?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm delighted that one of the ships that I commissioned when I was Secretary of State has now effectively gone into service of the Royal Navy, RFA Proteus, whose specific job will be to counter the Russian RERP program and to make sure that the knowledge of our cables and our allies' cables and pipelines are protected and surveyed. And if I was the Secretary of State Defence, her first task would be over towards Sweden, Estonia and Finland, I think, where I think sending some reassurance and indeed some survey would be important. Look, I think if Russia was behind this, and remember they have the RERP program, they have a specific program for threatening our infrastructure under the sea. If it was them, then I think, evidence would be laid before, no doubt, NATO, and I think people would take a decision that way. How you respond, I think there would be a range of options. I'm not sure a blockade of the Baltic Sea of Russia necessarily would elicit either the right protection that we would require, but or indeed the right response from Russia. I think there are many other ways to respond to Russia if they have deliberately done this. In a sense, I think I would examine them in a slower time rather than a quick question in a conference, to be brutally honest.
Thank you. But for the Estonians, what do you feel about this neighborly suggestion?
Well, one thing is that presidents are always right, so that you cannot. But this is at the moment for you, of course, not for me. First, well, my understanding is clear that our actions have to be appropriate and proportional. So, first. Secondly, we see what was the decision of the SACEUR yesterday. that there is a response to that regarding the reconnaissance and some vessels and also mine hunters. So we have to be very careful in that sense that to point the finger too early. And we have to be clear in that when we point the finger, then this finger is also pointing in the right direction. So in that sense, of course, we have the tools if necessary, and we have the possibilities if necessary, but we also have to respect the international maritime law. So when we go into that debate, then we have to open the international maritime law. And because today, yes, there might be a vessel coming from Suez Canal to St. Petersburg without any inspection. So when the international community is ready to open this, what we do on the sea in international waters, then we can come back to that.
Minister Spruce, do you have a different answer? I guess that we have...
Isn't it the time is out? Can I already finish?
18 seconds.
Now is the time to say that good question. Next, please.
Of course, I would be surprised if there would not be this question. And even though I think that if I dare risk to reinterpret President what he said that there are several alternatives. And of course, there is one alternative also to discuss what we can exactly do, and this would be one of the potential alternatives. But anyhow, of course, it is important, first of all, to be efficient on the protection of our critical infrastructure. And second one as well is important to be credible. Because, of course, if we really realize that there is some other state actor behind the incident, the credibility is an extremely important part. We cannot just ignore it. That's why I would still underline that, conceptually, that we have to speak and we have to act from the position of strength. And what NATO is doing right now, I think it's absolutely the right direction. Sending the surveillance, sending the mine hunters, sending basically the presence. But of course, this is one step. If really we have the information that more activity should be coordinated exactly in that direction. So any such step should be done and addressed by step which once more underlines both credibility and efficiency, and also strengths of NATO in the region.
Thank you. We are out of time, and it's appropriate that we are started with talking about land and air, but we must also talk about the sea, because any divisibility of both the areas or any piece is likely impossible. Thank you for providing insights. Thank you for the efforts of all of our allies to bring together and make sure that we can do what we need to do to protect every centimeter, every inch, and to address the new challenges on critical infrastructure as well. That means we're also out at sea. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.